All right. Far be it from me to shorten your all's conversations and sharing. So let me give you just another minute or so to wrap up what you're sharing and thinking about. And then we're going to move on to our next panel. Gen Z. I'm parenting a couple of them. It's harrowing at times. Major global events are what define generations. They have a way of shaping the lens of generations that come of age during them. Of course, the pandemic ranks as the most disruptive event in modern human history. Had a significant impact, of course, on Gen Z during a formative time in their lives. And began with a bang, of course, in March 2020, just weeks after Bluegrass Green Source's inaugural Sustainability Summit in this building, actually, just weeks after, 2 years ago. During the pandemic, we collectively learned to do less, spend less, and waste less. And some would say no cohort has been as profoundly influenced as Gen Z. The Gen Z table, as I'll call our table, has been discussing all day in various ways how to re-engage their generation in many ways. Gen Zers are more likely than any other generation to make lifestyle, political, and purchase decisions based on environmental values and principles. A 2021 Deloitte survey reported that climate change and protecting the environment was the #1 concern for Gen Zers, followed closely by unemployment, healthcare, and disease prevention. 2021 Do Something survey reported that 75% of Gen Zers are putting their money where their ideals are. If brands are not authentic, transparent, and clearly share their passion for sustainability, they will be the first to raise the red flag. The eldest Gen Zers are entering the workforce now, and they are demanding that their employers make a public commitment to DEI, which many of us are learning what that acronym is just in the last few months, at least I have been, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Research and reflections on what makes Gen Z abounds among sociologists, journalists, and bloggers. But the student leaders you're about to meet don't like to be labeled. They made that very clear. They've made it very clear to me in the time that I've gotten to know all of them, and I appreciate that. They prefer to be free of preconceived notions of what they value and what issues mobilize them. So all the labels and descriptions I just gave of their generation, some of them may be looking at me like, that's not me, and I don't appreciate that label. Instead, these student leaders blaze their own trail, make up their own minds about their now and their future. Maya Zachary, Sarah Mean, and Clara Hilbrecht are the 3 student leaders we're going to hear from today. Maya and I crossed paths 2 years ago when her Dixie Elementary School science teacher let me know she was watching a 5-year-old sustainability superstar unfold in her classroom. Then I watched Maya 2 years ago passionately implore her parents and grandparents' generation to consider the impact of plastic straws and invite anyone who would listen to join Maya Mina's Last Straw and fight for a world free of plastic pollution. Since then, and in addition to Maya Mina's Last Straw, Maya has planted over 100 trees in Lexington. Maya, we can't wait to hear from you.
Hi, my name is Maya Mina, also known as the Little Straw Girl. People call me this because I started a campaign called Maya Mina's Last Straw. Maya Mina's Last Straw is about encouraging others to give up plastic straws. I started it when I was 3 years old. I'm 7 now, but still pretty little. Thank you for sharing with me your precious time here at the summit today. Sustainability, that's a pretty big word. What it means is way bigger. It means the avoidance of the depletion of natural resources to maintain an ecological balance. That simply means don't use up or destroy our natural resources until our ecosystem is disturbed. That's our goal. Our goal is to give my generation a chance at normal and healthy life as we understand it. What I don't understand is the horrifying proof of imbalances in our world today. The Amazon is being destroyed. There's a carbon blanket around our atmosphere that keeps thickening and thickening by the day. The heat from that carbon blanket is melting the ice caps. The single-use plastics that we throw into the ocean are making islands everywhere. One of those islands is 2 times the size of Texas. It's so big that we gave it a name, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. There are coral reefs dying and wildfires killing trees, plants, and animals. I'm still going because of support from my peers stepping up against climate change, protesting against climate change, speaking in Congress to enact laws, making changes in their communities, and creating technology to help combat climate change. Some of them are still in school, like me, but they have a fighting spirit that your generation underestimates. I have read articles and found lawmakers and large corporations that commit their support to combating climate change. But what we call effort lacks urgency. I'm 7 years old. I can't vote for another 11 years, and I can't take a seat in Congress for another 18. Maldives and Fiji and Papua New Guinea will be well on their way underwater by then. The Amazon, I want to track the Amazon. What will be left of it then? We are dealing with masks for COVID right now. What masks will we be dealing with then due to the continuous degradation of the air quality? Your generation and my generation are an ecosystem in the call to combat climate change. We are hand in hand in the fight for survival for generations to come. So hold my hand and act now. Don't just say you're going to do something. Do it now. Here's how we can walk hand in hand. If you're in a position of power, rise up and make the hard choices. Educate yourselves and your children on the science of our survival. Empower others to take action. Stop turning a blind eye to the damage being done. Please get out of the way if you're not going to be part of the solution. My mommy and daddy always say, if we know better, we have to do better. I take this to heart and leave you with my words. Because we can, so we must. Thank you.
Thank you, Maya. I cannot wait to follow your lead for the next many, many decades. Sarah, I met Sarah when she was a sophomore at Paul Lawrence Dunbar High School. She summoned me to her campus to say, I want solar panels on my high school yesterday. She and a friend were determined. We invited them to help us explore on Paul Lawrence Dunbar High School the infrastructure, building design, economic feasibility of panels on their 20-year-old high school. And they collectively shifted their sights to making solar accessible and visible to students across Lexington. PV solar array on Paul Lawrence Dunbar was just not feasible for a public school district. But she was still determined. Solar energy would be accessible to her peers across our city in some capacity before she graduates high school. Her sophomore year, 2 years ago, Sarah founded a National Green Schools Society chapter at Dunbar. and founded and co-chaired the Bluegrass Youth Sustainability Council Solar Project Committee, and partnered with local sponsors to install 8 solar benches as of last month on Lexington High School campuses, public and private. This is all before she graduates high school in a few weeks. Her senior year this year, Sarah has served as Bluegrass Youth Sustainability Council, a coalition of student leaders, 50 student leaders from 11 public and private high schools. She has served as BYSE's co-student facilitator, essentially the leader of the organization, leading 50 students, organized in 8 separate project committees, essentially serving as the face of that organization. Sarah?
Thank you so much, Ms. Loxton, and thank you to you all for just coming here and supporting us today. Climate change. It refers to the long-term shift in temperatures and weather patterns. While a natural process, climate change has been unnaturally increasing in rate for the past hundreds of years. Due to poor human treatment and our severe exploitation of Earth, our home is now facing a planetary crisis. And right now, all around the world, there's ecosystems being destroyed, animals going extinct, and entire human communities being displaced. This crisis isn't mine, it isn't yours, it's our shared burden and our collective duty to remedy it. This is now the time to reflect on our past actions and alter the present to make a habitable future. I first joined this movement as a curious freshman in high school, eager to learn what makes our planet what it is now, and excited to discover what my role could be. After various internet deep dives, I became enthralled with renewable energy technologies, awed by its seemingly endless applications in society. However, with a little more searching, I was appalled to find that Kentucky ranked 47th in the nation in solar usage and development. This was a problem. The heightening stigma around renewables and limited access to environmental education on these topics had to change. So for the past couple of years, I've dedicated my time to promoting solar and directly exposing students and teachers alike to this novel natural resource, all in the form of solar benches. These benches are set to be installed at every single Fayette County Public High School campus and are what I hope to be the start of a revolutionary shift towards clean energy. Now, as a senior in high school and a soon-to-be college freshman, I'm more determined than ever to continue this path towards environmental education and fight for the only planet Earth we'll ever have. However, this was my journey towards sustainable learning. Before me stands an entire movement, one that's powered by a diverse network of races, nationalities, age groups, and socioeconomic statuses. With all of these differences that typically create a divisive state of mind, I've seen firsthand the exact opposite. I've walked amongst groups of students who on the surface seem to lack any semblance of a similarity, yet shared a grit and determination needed to create the change they want to see in their communities. I've sat into classrooms of teachers who bear their heart and soul into lessons they hope can inspire the future generation, urging their students to create a society open to amending the issues they weren't able to address. I've heard the mumbling from our communities, our families, that cry out for a safe place for their loved ones to grow up in. And even in this very moment, I stand by 2 young women whose paths drastically differ from mine. Yet each has led us to today where we speak up as one to those who will listen. This is why I'm confident in our ability as human beings to set all of our differences aside, wake up, and rise together to combat the most critical issue of this century, the climate crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. She leaves Lexington in a few months to start her new chapter at UPenn, and I will be working hard to stay in touch with her over the next several years and gradually convince her to come back to Lexington one day. Claire Hilbrecht emerged as a student leader while earning her natural resources and environmental sciences degree right here at UK. As a student intern and now as a full-time project coordinator, Claire has served as a tree champion, spearheading UK Urban Forest Initiative, which we heard about earlier, and UK Arboretum regional programs. I have watched Claire seamlessly convert ambitious and disparate project ideas from a diverse cross-section of Central Kentucky tree lovers into practical place-based innovative action. It's no easy task. As recently as last month, when one of our newest schools, Rise STEM Academy for Girls, needed to better understand the value and benefits of a campus native orchard in hopes of planting one this spring, which they did, Claire was the first to raise her hand and work with these second graders on the project. She was also instrumental in facilitating on-the-table climate conversations, which hopefully many of you heard about in the yard signs that have been around town to help elevate sustainability in our citywide small group on-the-table discussions. Claire.
Thank you. I would first like to take the time to acknowledge that we are standing on Indigenous homelands that were forcibly taken from our Indigenous brothers and sisters. And we are convening at a university that was funded in part by land grab initiatives against the Indigenous peoples of the Midwest. We cannot talk about justice and climate change without an acknowledgement of this unjust legacy and a commitment to ending the violence against Indigenous peoples across the world. When I heard about the theme of this talk, Gen Z, I started questioning why we separate ourselves into these definitive categories. I, for instance, was born on the cusp of being a millennial and a Gen Z, and while I now acknowledge that I am in fact a Zoomer, I vehemently denied it for a long time. I didn't identify with the attributes associated with my generation. Instead, I focused on what made me different from them. And I tried to separate myself from others in my age group. We see this all the time in our media, pop culture, and even in everyday conversation. How many times have you heard, "Okay, boomer," in reference to problems we have inherited, or jokes about Zoomers always being on their phones? And when it comes to big issues like climate change, it seems like our generations have become even more divided. As a Zoomer, I've often felt like the older generations have defaulted to me and my cohort to fix the climate crisis. And the common opinion is that the older generations, the baby boomers and Gen X's, caused the problem. But that ignores a very critical facet of this crisis we all face. Climate change is a structural issue that is a product of hundreds of years of systemic injustice and marginalization. As such, this crisis is far too complex to have been the result of one generation's mistake, and likewise, it is too big to fall on one generation to address. If we are to truly address the climate crisis fully and with consideration for all beings of the earth, then we must ignore these arbitrary divides that prevent us from uniting in the face of a common threat. And I mean all divides, not just generational ones. We must find resilience in each other as members of a shared community, because this issue transcends politics, borders, cultures, beliefs, race, age, and even species. And we must have the fortitude to imagine a better system that benefits all of us and weaves justice into everything it does, not as an afterthought or a compromise, but standing at the forefront of every conversation and decision. We must learn from the wisdom of our elders, realize the imaginings of our youth, and give rise to the voices that have too often been silenced by the system that brought us here. I believe in a better, more resilient future for all of us, but we need to look to each other with love, compassion, and mutual respect if we are to one day see that future as reality. When we do that, justice comes naturally to any climate solution. We can begin to prioritize sustainable alternatives developed through just transitions rather than quick climate fixes that more than likely will lead to deeper injustices. The urgency of this crisis cannot lead us to forget the livelihoods of those with whom we share this earth. But in finding community in each other amidst our divisions, we will find justice. Thank you.
Thanks to all of you, and you all please join me in thanking Maya and Sarah and Claire for sharing with us their lived experiences. Okay, and I think I'm turning over the mic to David.